Hello, heathens! I'm Megan Angus, and this is Spinning the Wheel podcast. In this weekly audio ritual, we explore the 8 seasons of the Witch's Wheel of the Year, and we discover how it is so much more than 8 Sabbats. We weirding witches time travel through holy days, festivals, and celestial events connecting our celebrations and magic to the past, present, and future. Our cackling fills the night as we take our turn gathering the wool, wielding the distaff, and spinning the wheel. Hello, my weird witches. Welcome back to Spinning the Wheel podcast with me, your martial host, Megan Angus. Had to think about that for a second. We are more or less going to jump directly into the shits this week. Our next Wheel of the Year class that is coming up is going to be for Ostara, aka Spring Equinox, aka Vernal Equinox, aka the start of the solar year / New Year's for some cultures around the planet. And that is going to be March 15th, I think. Wednesday. You can find out more information about that nowhere. Actually, at this very moment, I have nothing posted anywhere about it. But assuredly, I will get something up on the interwebs because that's, duh, I'm a professional. I'll have something up on my website soon. I will have something announced on my YouTube channel soon. You can always follow, subscribe, all that crap on my YouTube channel, and you will get an announcement or an alert when I post a new video or schedule a new live stream. You can also sign up for my irregular newsletter, wherein, in theory, I will announce upcoming classes. The thing is, people, time. That's a it's a slippery meatball. And I've had a very difficult time holding on to time the last few months. I don't know if it's just winter and that I have completely lost my grip on reality, or if something more sinister is afoot. Or more fun, for that matter. But anyways, I think that's what's happening, and I think you can probably get information about that stuff at some point in the near future in those places aforementioned. Okay. So what are we doing this week? Because we are going to jump directly into what the hell is going on this week. We are officially leaving February and heading into March. I don't know if you've looked at the calendar, but that is happening. That is actually happening right now. And so let us get started. This is Imbolc season, waxing moon in Gemini, lunar week 50, I don't know, 54. It kind of doesn't matter right now because we're sort of like drifting in between times. And I've talked about this a little bit in previous podcasts in the last few weeks, and I'm going to talk about it again. I'm shifting. This is part of why it's like lunar week ? I'm shifting the pattern a little bit, or I am shifting with the pattern a little bit. When we look back through time at the various calendar systems and the various ways that people created time and tracked time, some systems were dictated by the moon, some systems were dictated by the sun, some systems were dictated by an amalgamation of both patterns overlaying with each other. And certain groups kind of had that pretty well locked in, and really understood like the weird little hiccups in that. And other groups were like not understanding the weird little hiccups and did not necessarily have it locked in too well. But one of the places where we will see that a society or a civilization understood that there was something kind of odd happening with that is they will have extra weeks, or they will have time out of time place markers in their calendar system, or they will have even an extra month that they throw in. And so we are technically in some of that stuff. And it gets confusing because a lot of those systems were also built during a time when spring began on March 1st, or we can also say that March 1st began at spring equinox, that those two things were in alignment with each other. Um, and so a lot of the month of what we would think of as the time period that we call February was this sort of time out of time. And this is where we get a lot of our purification symbolism from, a lot of our ancestor work that we're doing in February, is because we are doing what we can to placate the past. And we're doing what we can to placate and soothe the old year that is dying, that is on its way out. We're saying thank you, we're saying goodbye. We might be gathering up the last little bits of energy from the old year, and or we might be doing our best to settle out any business that is left from the old year and wrap those things up before we enter the new year. And the new year here would have been dictated by, well, depends on what pattern we're following. But generally speaking, it was once we had the vernal equinox, aka the spring equinox. Um, Equinox, of course, being equal night, equal day. And we're going to talk about a lot of this stuff in the upcoming equinox class, the Ostara class. But it's important because some of that stuff kind of applies now, and yet some of it doesn't apply. um, because we haven't had the equinox yet, obviously, right? We can see for us folks who live here in the northern hemisphere that the days are in fact getting longer. The sun is crawling slowly and getting higher and higher in the sky. And so we're getting more and more light. The light is coming at a different angle every day, and the days are incrementally getting longer and longer. And that's going to lead us up to the equinox, where we will have equal night, equal day. And then every day after that, the day will be longer than the night. We still will have chilly weather. We're still going to have, things that are beginning to grow. But the shift is here, or it's around the corner. It's coming. And like I said last week in the podcast, we are in the last 4 weeks of winter, and that's where we really feel the shifting energy begin. Today, I'm recording this on February the 28th. Sorry, this is a little late, everybody. But this is truly the moment where we start to see the tip over into Aries and Mars. Now, we are still in tropical astrology in Pisces season. Don't get me wrong. But this is part of how these things have gotten kind of confused over the thousands of years of humans working with these systems. And so TLDR, right? Too long, didn't read. Long story long. We are sort of in a drifting time. This time period, wherever February is, wherever it is that we think of February as ending, wherever it is that we think of March as beginning, is this sort of floating time until there was the equinox point where the solar calendar could be officially restarted, because we know we have had equal night, equal day. We are certain of it. And so even if we weren't sure what day we were on last week, we know where we are now. That's kind of part of what this is. So long long-winded explanation as to what's up with the title of the podcast for this period of time, but it's because I've been following the lunar calendar for a while. That is the calendar that dictates the Asian lunar year, and we've been doing that for the last 2 years. And so I just wanted to switch things up a little bit, and so we are going with something that is a little different, but also just as accurate as any of these other calendars. Okay, so that all said, what the hell are we doing in Imbolc season? Because we still have a few weeks to go before we are done with it. Our major themes that we are working with as we are hanging out in Imbolc season are purification, perseverance, renewal, and dreams. And, um, by turns, these words become really important to us as we move through this season because, um, you know, perseverance, I think, becomes one of those words that we really grasp for. For February, even though it's the shortest month, it can feel like the longest month for a lot of folks who are sort of slogging through the gray, wet, cold, dark days of this portion of winter. It can be uh, a very intense time for a lot of people, a moment of a lot of struggle for folks. And so when we tip into March, there can be this sense of like, we've made it, right? We've persevered through the worst part of winter. The light is returning, it's coming back. And so that tips into our renewal stuff that we're thinking about, like the renewal of this energy and these energy cycles. What is up with the purification? As we talked about in the Imbolc class and for the last several weeks of Imbolc, we are purifying in the sense of we are going out physically into the natural world, or we are going internal to our emotional worlds, our psychological worlds, and we are cleaning out the old stuff. We are clearing out branches that maybe have broken off of trees during the winter storms, and we're clearing out the garden. We're clearing out all the leftovers from the old crops out of the garden. And we're doing that physically and metaphorically. So, purification in terms of, like, again, clearing out all of the stuff from the old year, letting go of, getting rid of, burning off, or otherwise destroying or using up the energy from the old year. Purification. And then dreams. During Imbolc season, one of our biggest jobs that are in front of us as witches, heathens, and pagans, one of our biggest jobs during Imbolc season, in my opinion, is to dream, is to fantasize, is to drift in the possibilities, to drift in the infinite potentials of all of the things that we might become, all the things that we might do, all the things that we might promote or support or try to foster or give birth to in the coming solar year that kicks off at spring equinox. So our whole job at Imbolc season or throughout Imbolc season is to sort of dream up all of these possibilities, aka seeds that we are then going to put in the ground at spring equinox and attempt to grow in this year. And again, we will talk more about that process in the upcoming class. But those are our big themes that we're working with at Imbolc season. Um, and and something that I often say about Imbolc season is that this is a season that it is appropriate to slow down and take our time and drift a little bit. It's okay. I am not a fan of January 1st blasting out of the gate at 5 a.m. with a million plans, and I've got all of my, possible projects lined up ready to go, and I'm in the gym, and I'm the first caller on the radio, and I'm the first person attending the meeting, and no. If that works for you, cool, super great. I'm not telling you don't do it, but I am kind of telling you don't do that because that's not energetically what's happening. At January 1st is, just literally a few days after winter solstice. Biologically, we're meant to be hibernating and or taking it easy, keeping it close to home, sitting in the dark, really, of Yule. And then February 1st, 2nd, when Imbolc hits, that is when we can start. And even then, we're not officially starting. We're beginning to stretch. We're beginning to move gently after the total stillness of Yule. Think about it like, you've slept all night, right? You've slept and you slept hard. The very first thing that you do when you wake up is what? Leap directly out of bed and go running across the house and jamming yourself into clothing. I mean, maybe if you're late for work, but generally speaking, that's not actually good for you, right? The better thing would be to gently wake up, do some deep breathing, uh, sit up in bed, do some very gentle stretching. We are bringing consciousness back to the body. We're waking the body up and the mind and the spirit and being like, hey, we're going to do that thing again. That's really what Imbolc season is for. It's like the stretching out and the warming up before we do the actual exercise routine of spring equinox. So that's really where we're at in this season. But now, as we step into March, we are going to feel the energy begin to pick up. It will be unavoidable, and it will be unignorable, really. And it really kind of doesn't matter what the weather is because the days themselves are getting longer and brighter because of the literal shift in the angle of the sunlight as the sun gets higher and higher in the sky. And so this is on a biological level and a deep psychological level kind of difficult to ignore. And it's and impossible not to feel it on some level that like something is happening. I often think of the last few weeks and days of Imbolc as like when you're sitting. I know I keep giving metaphors because I am a metaphor. but but I think of it as like that moment when you're sitting in the theater in the dark waiting for the movie to start. And there's that, palpable sort of anticipation and excitement because you know something is about to happen. But in this moment, we're sitting quietly in the dark and we're waiting and we're imagining what could I see? What is about to happen? That's where we're at. Okay. So that's what's up for Imbolc season in general. Just wanted to get you guys grounded in our symbolism because, it's been a minute since we talked about that. So this week, what are we doing? What are we starting off with? Well, Monday the 27th. So technically yesterday, but I'm going to get us situated in that. Sorry. Wasn't feeling good yesterday and I needed to take a day off. We are looking at a waxing half moon in Gemini at 8 degrees. So we've talked about this a lot, but I'm going to remind you again, in case it's your first time here, what do we get when we have a waxing half moon? Waxing means that we are going from the new moon towards the full moon. The moon is getting bigger. It is waxing. The half moon means that the moon and the sun are square to each other. So at the new moon, we have a seed. Boop, we pop it in the soil. At the waxing crescent moon, that seed sprouts out 2 little leaves. Boop, and it's kind of at that moment that there's like this little tug from the past of like, am I really going to try to push against gravity? Am I really going to try to like do this project? I don't know. And so then we get to the waxing half moon, and now we've had more growth, more development in the process. And now we have to sort of think to ourselves, okay, do I have any course corrections that are necessary here? Like, what is it that I'm trying to do? Where are we trying to go? We need to be clear in our efforts and all of that stuff. And so, because it's square to the sun, there's some friction here. There's some resistance from the process, or maybe some issues within the process that need to be addressed before further progress can be made. And we get these every month. So don't feel like this is some kind of epic, like, oh no, it's square to the moon. Like it happens all the time. It happens twice a month, in fact. We're going to be okay. But any good process will have a little friction. Any good process is going to have a moment where we kind of check in and are like, am I on the right path? Do I have all the parts that I need? Are there any course corrections I need to make? That stuff. And that's really where we're at. So, what do we get with a waxing half moon in Gemini? Well, Gemini and Mercury are going to have a lot of influence this week for us. Mercury, in particular, has a pretty interesting transit that we're going to talk about later in the week. And in this lunar phase, in this particular sign, there really is a moment for us to talk to ourselves about how we use language and how we use data and information to get what we want? Do I talk a different way to certain people, right? I know a lot of our Black and African American and dark skinned friends out there have to engage in code switching, right? They know that they have to speak a certain way to certain people to be accepted in those environments. And all of us do this to some extent. Some of us are basically forced to do it to a greater or lesser extent. And some of us do this voluntarily, but it's not just people of color that are subjected to that. Trans folks have to do this, queer folks have to do this. And it's knowing that using a particular language, a particular word, a particular tone of voice is going to elicit a particular response or not elicit a particular response from a person or a group that you're talking to. And so on the most neutral level, this waxing half moon is asking you to just kind of take a moment to think about that stuff with yourself. Where do you do that? And when do you feel like you'd have to do it? And where are you doing it in places where like you just want to get your way? And so you're going to talk a certain way to a person or maybe yourself to elicit a particular response. Now, in moon phase astrology, where I get a lot of this information about the moon from Raven Galdera, talk about the book all the time, um, they talk about specifically where in this past month did you tell yourself a lie? And what was the result of you telling yourself this lie and or believing the lie or not believing it or whatever? Like what was that process for you? Why did you do that? What were you hoping to accomplish? What kind of language did you use to talk to yourself there? um and I think that it's possible to engage in this in a playful way and even a healthy way internally. I definitely will quote unquote lie to myself about a project that I'm working on, because if I face the project and I actually see it in its totality, I get overwhelmed or I'm like intimidated by it. I'm like, "Oh, I could never do that." But if I quote unquote lie to myself, right? And I'm like, "Nope, I'm just working on this simple little thing over here." Then I can kind of muscle my way through the project pretending, quote unquote, that I'm not really doing the thing that I'm actually doing. I do this to myself a lot. And maybe you do too. Maybe that sounds familiar. Or maybe this is coming up for you in some other way of like, I really had to lie to myself about this thing and I wish I hadn't. Or I felt like I had to lie to myself about this, or I was not in control of my interior dialogue, my internal dialogue, and ended up, saying XYZ to myself. And now, I'm kind of facing the reality of like, I know that's not true. So, that's really what this moon is kind of asking us to face. Um, this moon is sextile Venus in Aries, who is hanging out at 8 degrees of Aries. Venus is. And so there's something there about wanting harmony, right? Venus in this context might be like, oh, I just wanted to keep things nice. Oh, I just wanted to appear friendly. Oh, I just wanted to keep the harmony in that situation. It was just a white lie. It was a white lie. And we've had plenty of white lies in the last 2000 years, thank you. Right? And I get that too, right? There are times when it's the right time to like lay the truth down, and there's times when it's like I do not have the energy. And I am just going to not be entirely forthcoming right now. So think about all of that stuff. Think about that stuff, and how that applies to you, or maybe it doesn't apply to you. Maybe this is one of those lunar phases that's just like, that's happening. It's in the world. Cool. But I'm not really feeling it. See how it plays out for you. That stuff. Okay. When we are working with the waxing moon in Gemini for our lunar body work, we are activating, awakening, adorning, stimulating, and preparing for action the shoulders, the elbows, the wrists, the arms, the hands, and the armpits. These are all of the parts of the body normally ruled by Gemini. As I say every week, I am not a doctor of the human corpus. I am a doctor of the cauldron and that which is stirred. Or whatever. Sounded cool though, right? sounds important. So check with your trusted health advisor before incorporating any of this information. Um, and of course, you can always work with the metaphor. So, is there something within arm's reach of you metaphorically? Is there something that you are elbowing? Is there something you are shouldering? Is there something you are reaching for? That stuff. Does that make sense to any parts of your process? And for our plant body work, we are harvesting, we're doing pest control, disease control, we are plowing, we're weeding, and we are pruning to encourage above ground growth. Yes, this is, uh, and here also check with your local gardener. But this can be a really great time period for trimming things back to encourage bushy growth as spring slowly approaches. And also, as our weather patterns shift and our temperatures fluctuate greatly, pay attention to your plants, that they are not too dried out, or that they are not too humid, and that there is not, some mold or mildew or something along those lines being fostered there with the changing weather. And this week, we are going to do it the same as we have been doing it the last couple of weeks, where we are just going to go straight through with the astrology, the holy days, the fixed stars for each day, and not break it down into the different subjects, because once again, we have a week where we just don't have a whole lot of stuff going on, because we have still multi-day festivals that are occurring, multi-week festivals that are occurring, and or we are just getting out of having several multi-week festivals, and this is legitimately a downtime. And so everything kind of takes a moment to breathe before we head off into the next big festival cycle. So what else is happening Monday, February 27th? Nothing. We have no astrology of note on that day. We have no fixed stars rising on this day, and we really don't have any holy days of note that I wanted to talk about. So so maybe there's that too. So let us move on to Tuesday the 28th. Okay, what do we have going on Tuesday the 28th? Again, not a lot. We have no astrology of note for this day. 6:40 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, later in the day / the next day for everybody else around the planet. We have the moon moving into Cancer. We will talk about that more in just a moment. We have no real holy days of note for the 28th. We have Cake Day from our Saxon friends and ancestors, but this is hearkening back to the Lent and Carnival / Mardi Gras traditions that we talked about last week with Bun Day and Pancake Day. This is Cake Day. It's all a continuation of that. So again, that's what I'm saying. Like, a lot of this stuff is either we're in the midst of this thing that's lasting for several weeks, or we just had a thing that was lasting several weeks and it has ended. The Lenten season has just started, and so that's going to carry on for 46 days, give or take. And yeah, so there you go. So the only thing that we really have to talk about here, and we don't have much to say about it, is the heliacal rising of the fixed star Scat, Skat, and we find this star in Aquarius. And this star basically translates to the idea of wishes or good luck or good fortune. As we have found with many of our fixed stars throughout the constellation of Aquarius, there is something about benevolence, wishes, good fortune, power that is intended to be used benevolently on behalf of the group, all of that good stuff. And if you want more information about that, go listen to last week's recording. But the gig is with a lot of these stars in Aquarius that are associated with the idea of goodness or good luck or wishes or, boons or gifts from the universe or whatever. The idea behind a lot of them is you're sort of receiving this blessing from on high, from the universe, the gods, ancestors, whomever you like to think about when you say that stuff. These are not intended solely for you. They are intended for you to spill out to your family, your friends, the people around you, the community that you are a member of, that these benevolent gifts that are coming from wherever uh, are, yes, they are for you, but they are also for you to distribute. And moreover, not distributing them actually can draw in some funky stuff. Um, and, those ideas have a lot of baggage with them, right? Good and evil and right and wrong and all that stuff. But generally, I mean, it's kind of an idea that sort of makes sense, right? Generally speaking, if there are gods and they were giving us gifts, occasionally that gift is probably just for you. But if it's a cool enough gift, they're probably hoping that you're going to spread it around and share it with some other people. Just throwing that out there. Maybe I'm wrong. Just putting that out there. All right, that's everything for the 28th. Just a little lecture, and then we move on. Okay. To March 1st. And now, as I was saying before, once we hit March, however we're counting that March has started, whether we're thinking of March starting last week, quote unquote, with the new moon, or we're thinking of March starting now with the calendar date of March 1st, or we're thinking of March as these last 3 to 4 weeks before the equinox, or starting at the equinox, even whatever, we are starting to see the winding up of the energy. We're starting of the, well, I guess I should say it like this. We're starting to see the wrapping up of the old winter energy and the introduction of the buzz of spring. And more as we move closer and closer to the equinox, we are going to see holidays, feast days, celebrations that are a single day or multi-day or even multi-week events that are about priming the pump, that are about waking the body back up, coming back to life, coming back to vitality and virility, and bringing back the light and bringing back the energy and the action and all of that stuff. A lot of that is because the growth season is just about to begin and has already technically begun in a lot of places. Um, but that thing, the action, we're back, baby, that thing. That sort of energy is going to start to become more and more apparent in our various feast days and holy days and celebrations, past and present. So March 1st, what do we have? First off, let's talk about the astrology of this day, because we have a very potent transit on this day. At approximately 9:35 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, later in the day / the next day for everybody else around the planet, we have Venus in Aries conjunct Jupiter in Aries at 12 degrees. Now, these two planets are basically going to start hanging out with each other around February 27th or 28th, and they're going to be hanging out within a degree or two of each other through Friday, Saturday-ish, like the 3rd, 4th-ish. It is exact late Monday or early Tuesday, again, depending on where you are on the planet. Now, let's break this down just a little bit. Venus and Jupiter conjunct pretty much once a year. Some years the cycle doesn't quite hit, but you're pretty much going to get it just about every 12-ish months. And so in that, not that exciting. It's kind of cool, right? But we'll see it again. We saw it last year, we'll get it next year. Okay. But at the same time as this, we have Chiron, the planetoid Chiron, hanging out at about 14-ish degrees of Aries. So Chiron is like right up in the mix. It's not exactly conjunct, but it's right there. And having those three planets hanging out together is pretty potent. That's pretty intense stuff. Venus and Jupiter are often referred to as the lesser and greater benefics or benevolence. And they are thought of as the two planets that are the most responsible for bringing us boons, gifts, blessings from the universe, assistance from the universe. This is a really fantastic day for making a wish, asking for help, throwing the penny in the well kind of imagery. I know I said that last week, but I think I said that last week, but I'm saying it again this week. And being that they are both in Aries while this is happening, there is a very brave element to this and a pioneering spirit about this conjunction. Um, though Venus and Jupiter will conjunct pretty much once a year, it's not always going to be in Aries. And we've got a lot of other really spicy stuff going on in Aries, coming up in this next month. Not not just, but also including two new moons in Aries. um, before and just before and after the spring equinox. It's like, hi-yo, or not just before, sorry, just after, and then a month later from the spring equinox. I know what I'm talking about. Hush. But but this is just a really incredible place in the zodiac to have this conjunction with Chiron hanging out nearby, who is also saying, hey, some of the things that we are wishing for are born out of painful experiences that we've had. And we could be wishing for the alleviation of that pain. It could be that we are wishing for deep and profound healing, the information, the gift, the wisdom, the help that we need to heal this pain that Chiron might represent for us. In my notes, what do I have? Live like anything is possible. And this might also be a day where you put on comfy jammies and you kick it on the couch all day, totally casual, zero worries, bills are paid, who gives a shit? Like everything is rolling, everything is fine, everything is okay. Um, thinking back just briefly, not to harsh the buzz, but thinking back briefly to this waxing half moon in Gemini. Am I telling myself a lie? Is that why I feel like everything is fine? I'm ignoring the data. I'm ignoring the facts, right? I'm just telling myself a cute little fairy tale. Maybe. But I think that this Venus and Jupiter conjunction in Aries is really encouraging us to be bold and and because Chiron is right there, to really be real with ourselves around what's not working, what do we need to heal, what do we need to address that is painful in our lives, and really lay in on asking for the help, asking for the gifts, asking for the guidance. And self-healing is a thing, but we can only get us so far. And at some point in our healing process, we are going to have to reach out to people outside of us to get that unbiased opinion, to get that other perspective from somebody else, because they are also going to bring in information that we just simply don't know. And why I'm reminding you of that is because this is in Aries, and Aries stirs up our ego. It really ties into our self concept. And we might really be feeling like, I have this pain, I have this particular experience that only I could ever possibly know about, and I've done my best, and how dare you, a lot of that kind of stuff. Um, and so if there is a voice in us that's having a little tantrum, that's fine. Let's sit on the floor, kick our legs a few times, have a little tantrum, right? It's fine. Poor baby. And then get up and go, okay, cool. But now I'm going to ask for help because you know what? There are things that I don't know. There are experiences I have not had. And that's not a shameful thing. That's not a lack on my part. It's just simply all people have this somewhere in their life. And there is always a place where I don't know. And it is appropriate for me to go ask for help and ask for information from someone else. And then on the other side of it, it's my job to utilize that information and that assistance that I've asked for. And that is also a thing that can come through when we are having a Venus Jupiter transit. We can feel like everything is so good, I don't need to work on it. Everything's fine. It'll work itself out. Everything is super great. So 95% of this transit, very cool, super lucky, very beneficial. Like I said, throw a penny in a well kind of vibes. Um, right? Good fortune, the wish, just the day before with that heliacal rising of scat. But also being real with yourself around, is there a place where I need to buckle down? Is there a place where I need to get my ego out of the way to be able to get the information that I actually need? etc., etc. Okay. What else is happening on this day? We have from our Romanian friends and ancestors, Martisor, from our Bulgarian friends and ancestors, Martnitsa. And these holidays are very much in alignment with Maslenitsa from our Slavic friends and ancestors that we talked about in last week's podcast. These are all very similar to each other. Martisor in Moldavia, or excuse me, Moldova and Romania. This is a very pagan celebration of spring. A lot of culturally, a lot of folks mark March 1st as the beginning of spring. Um, and so Martisor, as I said, very closely tied to Martinitsa and Maslenitsa. These are all very similar names, you'll notice. And note the Mart or Marti at the beginning, or Marten at the beginning of these words. That's Marty that we hear in the phrase Mardi Gras or Mardi Gras. And that is Mars, because we are stepping into the month of March. So, yes, all of these words actually are related and roll back to that deity, that planet. And here's one more for you. Mars, as we think of this planet currently, is very warlike. It's very much in charge of being on the offensive and the defensive and holding the weapons and wearing the armor and all of that stuff. But in the olden days, in the beginning of our myths around Mars, Mars was an agricultural god. Isn't that interesting? And so it very much makes sense on a very deep level that Mars is having all of this emphasis at this time of year, because we are all about to go back out into the garden and kick off the growth cycle again at this time of year. So here we go. This is, like I said, it's a folk holiday. It's a pagan holiday. The colors red and white are very important in this. Also, the combination of black and white, or blue and white, red or black or blue. Black or blue being representations of winter and that energy, and then white being sort of the sun coming back. Red also can be around the vitality and the sun coming back. Um, Little string dollies are created in some of these traditions. Sometimes they're these little tassels that people wear. They tie them to trees. They do all of this really cool stuff with them. And wearing the symbols, whether it's a little tassel or a little doll or whatever, was thought to be good luck. And people were kind of like, hey, you're doing the thing. Very cool. It symbolizes new life, fertility, conception, the spring, and the name Martinitsa, or whichever version of it that we're talking about, speaks also to the goddess or the deity Baba Marta. And again, Baba Marta is grandmother March, grandmother Mars, grandmother of this portion of the year, but also Martial, right? Martian, Mars like. So vital and ferocious and coming back powerful, but also in charge of the surging life that's coming up from the frozen ground and the return of the vitality of the natural world and all of that good stuff. So that's all happening for those cool cats on this day. In alignment with that really cool conjunction with Venus and Jupiter. Okay, so moving on to the next day, Thursday the 2nd, we have some more potent astrology. And our potent astrology of this day, also tying in with our Gemini theme at the beginning of the week, is Mercury conjunct Saturn in Aquarius at 29 degrees. And reading through my notes, this is the type of stuff that I wrote down about this. Wise judgment, a moment of big picture thinking, rigid thinking, wordsmithing, practical but boring, articulate, but impersonal, and in particular, articulate but impersonal approaches to wisdom and skepticism. Maybe a healthy skepticism, or maybe a skepticism that goes a little overboard. This is all the stuff that was kind of coming up for me when I was thinking about Mercury conjunct Saturn. So we're kind of carrying through that conversation at the beginning of the week around how do I utilize language? How do I work with words to get what I want? And here, Mercury and Saturn are both having this really intense conversation around, okay, so what is language and how do we use it to like make things happen? How do I use language to control? Right? Think about all the Saturnian stuff. How do I use language to create a boundary? How do I utilize language to create a container? Um, how do I utilize language to keep me safe? How do I utilize language to keep a situation predictable? These are all Saturnian themes. And some other random pieces of information about this conjunction. One, it's at 29 degrees, and a lot of astrologers have been talking about the 29-degree thing this year because we have a couple of really potent planets hanging out at 29 degrees of whatever sign they're in. Um, and generally speaking, the 29th degree of the sign is not thought to be a super exciting place to be. It emphasizes the malefics. It emphasizes or gives power to the planets that are normally thought of as like the planets that might cause us some problems or bring in challenges. And so in this, you might be erring on the side of caution to the point of being like overly cautious. You might be erring on the side of responsibility to the point of being like super impersonal, like I was saying, like practical to the point of being boring. Because that makes Saturn happy. Saturn's like, let's just keep it boring and predictable and super plain, and we'll win. It'll be success all the way through. We'll hate it, but it'll be successful, and we'll be safe, and it'll be lovely. Um, and Mars is kind of like, or God damn you, Mars! Shut up! I'm talking about Mercury. Mercury is like, but I want to talk about it. I want to think about it. I want to exchange information. I want to exchange data. So the 29th degree can sometimes be a hot spot. And the other thing that I think is interesting here is that this is the last transit that Saturn is going to experience in Aquarius. And then next week, it's going to move into Pisces for the first time in 30 years. And it is going to stay in Pisces even after it experiences its retrograde that it's going to experience later in the year. It's in Pisces for good. Um, and not only that, but Mercury is going to head into Pisces literally a few hours later. So Mercury has this conversation with Saturn and is like, cool, and I'm out. And then pieces out and heads directly into Pisces, where it is in its fall. And what does that mean? When a planet is in its fall, this is a term that you might hear in your astrological studies. When a planet is in its fall, it means that it has a harder time doing its job. It's not as comfortable in that sign as it might be in other signs. So why is Mercury having a hard time in Pisces? Because Mercury wants the definite definition of a thing. It wants to know the exact data. It wants to know the information. It wants to be very certain on the very specific, real information and data about a thing. Again, it wants definite definitions, right? And in Pisces, there is no definition. Everything is everything. Mercury is like, I want to know that this is this, and we have a definition for that, for this. And I want to know that that is that, and we have a definition for that. And this is this because it's this and not that. And that is that because it's that and not this, right? Everything is in its right place kind of thinking. That's what Mercury wants. Mercury doesn't necessarily have any opinions or feelings about this or that, but it wants to be very clear on the definition between this and that. And in Pisces, there is no boundary. There is no definition. Everything is everything. And so Mercury is like, oh, Lord. Oh, okay. So is it true? Is it a fantasy? Am I looking at a dream? Or is this reality? I don't know. And so Mercury can have a little bit of a difficult time moving through Pisces. Is it like a Mercury retrograde? Kinda, a little bit. I wouldn't maybe go that far, but over the next 3 weeks or so, as Mercury is cruising through Pisces, you might slow down and reread the text message before you respond. You might slow down and reread the fine print before you sign the contract. If things start to feel confusing in a conversation, stop, double back, ask the person to clarify themselves, ask if you are being clear. Do they understand what you are saying? Is there a way that you could say it that would be more clear? That stuff. Just double check and make sure that what you are saying is what the person is hearing, and that what they are saying is what you are hearing, and that you're both on the same page and understanding each other. That's all I'm going to say about Mercury and Pisces. That's plenty. Generally speaking, it's extremely imaginative. It's very dreamy. It is a lovely, creative transit. Lots of opportunities for writing poetry and doing those types of things, but also can get a little foggy, can get a little murky sometimes. Like I said, Mercury can have a little bit of a difficult time getting its job done while it's traveling through Pisces. And so that's our astrology for Thursday the 2nd. The only other thing that I have for this day is that from our pagan friends and ancestors in the modern Wheel of the Year calendars, we have Holy Wells Day, as I have mentioned several times already in this podcast. Holy Wells, right? Throwing a penny in the well. Well, here we are. So what is a holy well? A holy well or a sacred spring is a well or a spring or a small pool of water revered in a spiritual context, also usually in a cultural context. The water is often thought to have some kind of a healing quality. We think about like the fountain of youth, but it can also be used for blessings. It can be used to, whether or not you can literally cure physical diseases, that's up for debate, sure, but spiritual maladies oftentimes are addressed at holy wells and sacred springs. The water is usually said to have been made to flow in that spot by a mythical figure, a deity, a saint, somebody fancy. And in Celtic regions, strips of cloth are often tied to the trees that are around the holy wells, and these are known as Clutie wells. And that is a tradition that is still practiced in a lot of places, but it is unfortunately dying out in some places. And there's some conversation around the environmental impact of tying rags to trees and stuff. I'm not going to get into it, but holy wells are something that we see throughout various myths and sacred stories. Holy wells play a really important part in a lot of stories for gods and goddesses and other archetypal entities. And so this is a day for holy wells, and it makes sense because we are in Pisces season and Imbolc season and all of this stuff that kind of like features water purification, washing things away, and our Aquarius Pisces vision, right, of the jug pouring out and the fish swallowing the water, and all of that good stuff. So that's what we've got for Thursday, the 22nd. Okay, moving on to Friday, March 3rd. But before that, how about an ad? Okay. If you love this podcast, you can support this work through Patreon. Thank you a bajillion billion times. See, the sirens are going off even as I say it. Thank you so much to my patrons. You guys don't even know. You don't even know. Thank you so much. You can sub for as little as $1 if you just think this podcast is dope and you want to support it. I don't run ads on the podcast, partly because I don't want to, and partly because I won't get paid even if I do. So screw them, man. You can sub, as I said, for as little as $1 or $5, even if you want to just support the podcast. And this is plenty of information. But if you want even more information, extra podcasts, extra videos, extra information about the Wheel of the Year, magical practices, tarot, etc., etc. Subbing at the higher levels, you get all kinds of cool free stuff. And at the even higher levels, you get free readings every month with me to be able to integrate all of this information into your personal life based on what's going on in your natal chart and all of that other good stuff. Join and change your life forever. Or, whatever. Thanks so much for the support. If you can't support financially, I completely understand, because life sucks on Earth right now. It's too expensive for everything. Tell a friend, share it on social media, give it a thumbs up. If you're feeling especially hedonistic, you can leave a rating or a review. All right, that's the end of the ad. Let's get back to the podcast. Alrighty, Friday the 3rd of March, we have our gibbous moon, or waxing gibbous moon, in Cancer at 27 degrees. And let's talk about this for a second. This moon is opposing Pluto at 29 degrees of Capricorn. So that's another one of these planets that's hanging out at 29 degrees, bringing in potentially some funky vibes. But what are we doing with a gibbous moon? Well, the gibbous moon obviously comes after the waxing half. Whatever the corrections were that we needed to make at the waxing half, in theory, we've made them over the last few days, or we've considered them anyways. And now the gibbous moon is like, we are well on towards producing whatever it is that we're going to produce in this lunar cycle and have it culminate at the full moon. And the gibbous in our metaphor that we will often use for the lunar cycle, we've got the seed at the new moon, the sprout at the waxing crescent. Sorry, an actual vine appears at the waxing half, and at the gibbous moon, there's a branch, and the branch is where we are going to have a fruit appear at some point, the full moon. And so the gibbous moon is sort of like where we begin to start to see a little bit of the results of our work, ish. But our waxing gibbous moon in Cancer very specifically is focused on family stuff and family vibes. And you know what that word means for you, and whom all you like to include when you think about family stuff. This is generally a happy family vibe, generally speaking. There is an emphasis on family needs, family projects, but there's also an emphasis on like donations and working with people that are in need, and so our family, aka community. There might be an emphasis on babies. There's also a very clear emphasis in our magical practices on this moon on fertility. So if you are a person who's trying to make a baby, this might be a good time for you. And just to roll it back a little bit, the moon enters Cancer at 6:40. I think I said this previously, but just to be super clear, the moon enters Cancer at 6:40 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Tuesday, February 28th. And it hangs out in Cancer all the way to here, Friday the 3rd, and then it's in this sign, basically until 7:15 in the morning Pacific Standard Time when it enters Leo. So when we are working with, well, before I get into that, let me say this. This moon is opposed by Pluto, who is, as I said, hanging out at the 29th degree of Capricorn. So Pluto's feeling itself. And we know that Pluto is a heavy hitter, right? Pluto represents uh, some pretty heavy processes in our lives and situations in our world, and is connected to like a lot of political stuff and a lot of the heavy shit that's happening on our planet right now. Pluto could be seen as like a representative of a lot of those things. Um, and so this could just be a day of sort of reflecting on um, the powers in the world and where your family is and how far apart these two things are and how diametrically opposed these two things are. Like, here's what I need, here's what my family needs, here's what my community needs, and then here's what's happening in the world. It could just be as plain as that. Um, what I and because it's Pluto, it might be something that's happening like in the world, and we're not having a personal connection to it. Um, and also because it's Pluto, it could be that it's manifesting whatever the subject matter is. Could be manifesting in a way that feels a little obsessive. Like, I can't stop thinking about this. I can't stop talking to myself about this. Oh my gosh, this seems to be coming up everywhere I go, everyone I'm talking to. This subject matter is right there, da 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 da. And if you find yourself in a loop, do what you have to do to get yourself out of the loops. Focus on something totally neutral. Um, and jog yourself out of that rut of thinking. It's just a thing that Pluto does for us and to us. Because sometimes it's really helpful for us to dwell on a topic and like really drill down into it and get to like the deep center of an idea or an experience or a situation. And other times we're just chewing on it and it's like not getting us anywhere. And so you have to be the judge of that. You have to be the judge of that. Um, so we have that going on. And so, as I was saying before, like it can be a great day for doing community work, charity work, mutual aid work, fertility work, working with kids, working with babies, all of that stuff, very appropriate and very potent. And I will also say that anytime the moon is in Cancer, all of our magic and spell crafting is beefed up big time. It's definitely kicked up a notch, as they like to say somewhere. And with a waxing moon, any and all types of expansion magic are helped here. So, magic around taking up space, magic around creating things and birthing things and bringing things into the world, magic around increasing things. Um, so I want to raise, great time to do some magic around that, especially with the other astrology that we have this week. I want more of something. I want to increase something. I want to make something bigger. I want something to have a bigger impact in our spell work. All of that very, very supported and emphasized when the moon is in Cancer. Okay, so we've got that going on. And then, like I said, at 7:15 a.m., the moon slides right into Leo. Whoop! On to the next adventure. So our astrology for this day is Venus conjunct Chiron in Aries at 13 degrees. As I mentioned previously, where we have Venus and Jupiter conjunct at 12 degrees, now Venus is conjunct Chiron at 13 degrees. I kind of think that they're all sort of hanging out together, really. And where the Venus Jupiter conjunction, that transit is really about like invoking luck and bringing in fanciness and deliciousness of all sorts. The Venus Chiron conjunction is really going to emphasize the healing part of that thing. Your pains and your aches and your heart aches in particular might be really tightly in focus on this day, but in a way that possibly feels like there is some hope, there is something to do about that. You see the path forward, you know what you can do to address this stuff, that kind of thing. I know we've still got that moon opposed Pluto in the background. So, it might just be that you just like are really focused on this all day long. There might be a sense of like, oh wow, there's forces out there in the world that are really, really big and contributing to how I'm feeling this pain. Um, but in total, I think that the astrology of this day is actually really healing, and has a lot of opportunities for us to get down to the source of the pain and be able to name it and see it and identify it. And then now that we know what it is and how it moves within us, we can go forward in a much more practical way, to addressing it and resolving it or utilizing it or integrating it or in whatever way we're going to work with that stuff. Is there anything else I want to say about that? Yes. For our lunar body work, when we have a waxing moon in Cancer, we are adorning, activating, stimulating, awakening, and preparing for action the breasts, the chests, the belly, and the lungs. And again, same thing here. Is there something you need to get off your chest? Is there something that you're having a hard time digesting? Is there something that you've been breathing in a little too much? All of that stuff is very appropriate to think about in the metaphor when we are working with a waxing moon in Cancer. And for our plant body work, we are planting, transplanting, or grafting annual flowers and fruits and veg that bear crops above ground: corn, tomatoes, watermelon, and zucchini, as makes sense per the weather where you are. Okay. Anything else I want to say about this day? Yes. Why do I keep asking that? I have so many notes. Like, of course there's more that I'm going to say. Duh, it's me. That's what I do. So what do we have for holy days on this day? Well, from our pagan friends and ancestors slash our Norse and Teutonic friends and ancestors, we have Aegir's Day. Aegir is the god of the sea for our Norse friends and family. Makes perfect sense given that we are here in the midst of Pisces season and we have all this Aquarius energy around us as well, and all of that good stuff. The Old Norse name Aegir Sea is possibly connected to some other names that mean river or water, body of water, a stream. We also have words like, let me scooch through my notes here. Oh, I've said all of it. Okay. Water, river, stream, body of water, etc., etc. The name Aegir is identical to a noun for sea in skaldic poetry. Itself a base word in many kennings. And kennings, if you are not familiar, one of my favorite forms of poetry under the sun. For instance, a ship is described as Aegir's horse, right? So the horse that you would ride on as you were going over the sea, Aegir's horse, or the waves being described as the daughters of Aegir. Pretty cool stuff. So this is a day dedicated to this character, this deity. Other definitions potentially that connect to this name are things like the wintry one, the protector, or even the engulfer, which certainly makes sense when we think of the ocean swallowing people up. Also on this day, from our Greek friends and ancestors, we have the 3-day festival of Anthesteria kicking off. And Anthesteria was one of the 4 Athenian festivals in honor of Dionysus. It was held every year around this time, and the month of Anthesterion is actually named after the festival, not the other way around. And so the festival is broken up into 3 parts. And on the first day, we have a festival called Pythagogia. Sorry to my Greek ancestors. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, but it means the jar opening. And again, think about our astrological symbolism. Think about Aquarius, right? Hello. But on this first day of Anthesteria, the jars of wine from previous years were opened. Libations were offered to Dionysus, and the entire household joined in the festivities, including servants and slaves and anybody that was in that category. Spring flowers were used to decorate the rooms of the houses. Drinking vessels were decorated with flowers. And uh, this day was in and of itself sort of thought of as unlucky because the souls of the dead would come up from the underworld and walked around. So people would chew leaves of hawthorn or buckthorn and smear their doors with tar to protect themselves from this. But generally, this is a very festive holiday, even though there's like a little like it's generally really cool. And so again, harkening back to some of the stuff that we've talked about in the last few weeks, we see from our Roman and Greek friends and ancestors all of these holidays that are happening throughout February and into the very beginning of March, but really end of February, beginning of March, um as like doing what has to be done to appease the ancestors because they represent the old year. So here, the jars of wine from the old year are being opened, and boom, here come the ancestors to come and get a sip. Typical, typical. So that's the first day of it. And that is everything that I have to say about Friday the 3rd. So moving on to um, Saturday, the 4th of March, we have no astrology at all to talk about, just lunar transits, and that's it. So that brings us to the second day of Anthesteria from our Greek friends and ancestors. And the second day was called Coes or Choes, and this means the pouring. Merrymaking continued. People would dress up in costumes. Um, People would go on processions and they paid visits to their neighbors and their friends. Drinking clubs would hold contests to see who could drain their cups the fastest. So yes, beer bongs and like chugging contests. Yes, literally thousands of years old. People poured libations onto the tombs of their deceased relatives. And there was also a very secret festival, or excuse me, a very secret ceremony dedicated to Dionysus, um, where the queen, the ritual queen of Athens, would undergo some sort of marriage to the god of Dionysus. We do not have a lot of details left from that. Um, we don't know exactly what went down there. The knocking of sacred boots, perhaps, we don't know, but we know there was a lot of drunkenness, and that's probably why we don't have a lot of details. So that was the second day, and that's literally all I have to say about Saturday the 4th. So we're going to move directly on to Sunday the 5th. Um, so Sunday the 5th, first off, I will say that we have, actually, let me finish up with this. Uh, Going backwards slightly. Sunday the 5th, we would have had the third day of Anthesteria. And this is Kai Troy or Chai Troy, Kai Troy. And this means the pots. And this was a festival for the dead. Fruit or cooked pulse, which is like an oatmeal grain kind of thing, was offered to Hermes in his capacity as Hermes Chthonios, aka Hermes that went into the underworld and was the fairy person or the chaperone for the souls of the dead, or the psychonaut is the word that we often use here. And then, the souls of the dead who had come up to hang out, they've had some drinks, they've had some more drinks. Now some offerings are given to Hermes to kind of shuttle those people back to the lands of the dead where they belong. No one could taste the food. It was the food of the dead. And it was not only thought of as bad manners to eat the food that was intended for the dead, but it was also thought that you will be taken along with them down into the underworld. If you eat this food, you're going to go on this trip. So do not, not the thing. And there were a lot of things that, there was still a lot of celebrations. This is, again, one of those days that was kind of like, ugh, but it was still festival, still festive, and still celebrations taking place and all of that stuff. And like no performances were allowed in the theater, and that kind of stuff. So that's our 3-day festival that we are moving through from the 3rd to the 5th from our Greek friends and ancestors. So what else is happening here? Because that's literally it for holy days for the 5th. I guaranteed I'm ignoring some things. Trust. But that's what I wanted to talk about. For our astrology for March 5th, we have Mercury in Pisces sextile the North Node in Taurus at 5 degrees. And Mercury sextile the North Node is an opportunity to receive messages around our destiny, our karmic path, the karmic adventures that we might get tangled up in this coming year. If we want information around that stuff, this is a great day to ask for that. It's also a great day to send messages to whatever entities you're wanting to talk to around what your plans are around that stuff. What kind of adventures would you like to invite in? What sort of stuff would you like to get up to this year? This is a great time for that type of communication. Um, Later in the day, we will have the moon move into Virgo, and this is where we are going to have our full moon. Our full moon isn't until the 7th. We're not going to talk about it this week. But our moon moves into Virgo, so we are officially in the pre-funk for the full moon as of the evening of Sunday the 5th. Only other thing going on this day is that we have the heliacal rising of the fixed star Achernar, and we find this star in the constellation of Pisces slash the constellation of the river. These kind of blur into each other. And this star marks specifically the end of the river. So think of some of these other sea festivals that we have last week and this week, and oceanic festivals, the day of Aegir, one of the names of Aegir being related to the word river or stream. I'm sure it's just a coincidence, as we like to say here on the podcast. But the end of the river in our constellation symbolism is a metaphor for the ultimate results of all these boons and gifts that are pouring out onto us or into us from the universe. What are you doing with it? That's really kind of where we're going with the symbolism of this star is like, so we've made it to the end of the river. So where are we headed from here? What are we doing? Where are we going? The tide is carrying us. The current is picking up. The forces are swirling. Like, what are we going to do with this stuff that we've been given? Where do we go from here? That stuff. Okay. That moves us to Monday, the 6th. And on Monday the 6th, we have a little bit of astrology, just the sun in Pisces, sextiling Uranus in Taurus at 15 degrees. And uh, for those doing the astro work, the astrological work, sextiles, we've just had one, we're having another one. Sextiles are generally benevolent transits, and they are places where we are being given some clues around the work that needs to be done, and then we have to make that work happen. We're the ones that have to get in there and get our hands dirty. But if we ask for help, that help is probably going to come, and it's going to come in the form of suggestions and instructions on what is the work that we need to do to progress in whatever it is that we're trying to progress in. So what is the sun and Uranus talking about? Well, this transit can be very exciting. It can bring about very sudden change. It can be a very rebellious transit, but it can also bring about a really creative approach to a problem that we are trying to work on and solve. And so, cumulatively, this week, we have a transit that is bringing us an opportunity to like throw a wish into the universal well, right? We have a transit that is bringing us an opportunity to think in very practical terms around stuff that's, a little fantastic. We have a transit that is giving us an opportunity to heal some of our wounds. We have a transit that is giving us an opportunity to ask about our destiny, to name it and to talk about it. And now we have this transit that is offering us a really creative approach to this stuff. I find that when we are experiencing neutral or positive, benefic, whatever you want to say there, transits to or from Uranus, information is going to come out of left field. Something is going to be surprising, maybe even shocking, sudden, unexpected. And the more open we can be to that, the more helpful it is. Uranus is always trying to jog us out of the places where we have fallen into a rut. That's Uranus's job, or that's what it represents, is those places in our process where we're like, I need to do something different. I got to shake up the energy here. And so if we're not feeling it, even though it's a sextile that's generally positive, but some people just don't like change, right? It's just the timing is bad, or that's just not the kind of person I am. So even if it is a sextile, it can be like, oh God, what is this random BS that's just shown up? Like, what is this bullshit? Um, but if we can be open minded, Chiron, or excuse me, Uranus is like, hey, we could do this a totally different way. We could innovate. And that's Uranus's real job, is not just to bring chaos. It's not just to destabilize things. It is to bring chaos and destabilize and upset in the course of opening up opportunity, opening us up to something new that might work even better than the thing that we've already got going. And so, this being a sextile with the sun, there's a real opportunity here for this to be a little bit of a shakeup to our sense of self. And how we are approaching these ideas, like, but what would I do in this place, right? And Uranus is like, who cares? Like, who cares how you would have done it? Here's how you could do it. Here's how you might approach this thing. Very future oriented, very open minded, very dedicated to the idea of like, hell yeah, let's go, let's try, let's give it a shot. Okay, what else do we have going on this day? From our European friends and ancestors, we have a whole slew of festivals that have a bunch of different names: Bergbrennen, Funkenführer, um, Birkebrennen, Hüttenbrennen, and these are all coming from our Western and Central European friends in Luxembourg and Denmark and Germany and other places around there. And these are all festivals that are giant bonfires. Hooray! Brennen burning. Um, and they are all taking place at the end of the carnival season and at the beginning of the Lenten season. And this is also a part of the purification stuff that's happening. So brush would be burned, old crop stuff left over that might have been out on the fields to protect the fields from the weather and from like the topsoil being stripped off by storms. All of that stuff is burned. Ash Wednesday, I'm sure it's just a coincidence. And these festivals take a bunch of different forms. Sometimes it's just a giant bonfire. Sometimes there is a village get together kind of moment where somebody makes a giant wheel and it's set on fire and rolled down a hill. All of this stuff is representing life-giving spring sun, which is coming back. And also the purification and the burning off of all the old stuff and clearing out all of that old energy. What's really interesting to me is when you read through a bunch of these different festivals, there is a really big emphasis on men or male identifying folks doing a lot of or even all of the work. In some of these traditions, only men were celebrating this and all the women and the kids were staying home. Um, Sometimes there's a really big emphasis on the youngest man being the one that goes to collect the firewood, or the man who was most recently married going to collect the firewood. And so there's something here around virility and that surge form of power, that thrust form of energy that we talk about when we talk about our deities and our energetic symbolism throughout the year. There's something about sort of fostering that at this time of year. So we're stepping into March, Marta. Um, there is this idea of like the power is rising, the energy is surging. And so who in the village represents thrust energy, surge energy, energy that's on the rise? Those people are going to be in charge of doing this particular celebration. Also, on this day, from our Jewish friends and ancestors, we have the Fast of Esther. This is a really small holiday. Some Jewish folks practice it, some don't. Um, and this leads us into the holiday of Purim. And Purim is a multi day holiday celebrated by Jewish folks that marks an occasion back in the day when some gnarly ass king was trying to kill off a bunch of Jewish people and the plan failed. Hooray! In part thanks to Esther. Um, and Purim is another one of those really amazing and beautiful holidays that has a variety of different iterations. But a lot of the holiday focuses on dressing up in costumes, going out in processions, eating and drinking and being merry. Some folks, as a religious act, will do that stuff to excess. They like really go overboard. And that idea of like excess and overboard, like happiness and bliss and celebration to the point of delirium, is the holy act. Like that's really important for some Jewish folks. It's not for other Jewish folks. And just like getting out and celebrating and being with friends and family and having a good time, that's the thing that's the most important thing. But what I think is really interesting is that it's yet another holiday at this time of year that is focused on eating, drinking, being merry, putting on costumes, partying, celebrating vitality, celebrating life, having a good time, being in a procession in a crazy costume. And, again, something that we're seeing over and over and over again through Yule and through Imbolc season, right? Really starting in Samhain, as we talked about last week. So yet another holiday that sort of honors that tradition. Okay, so briefly getting into our witchery and our tarot for this week. I think that the tarot card that could be helpful for us to work with is the Nine of Cups. This is Jupiter in Pisces. And we could work with the others, but the reason why I'm picking this card is because I think of it as a little bit of a bullshitter card. Goddess, we love the Nine of Cups, but also, okay. So this is my bias, or this is my opinion, whatever, about this card. Um in this card, we see this person sitting in a white or maybe white and gray striped outfit. They're sitting on this bench. They have their little red hat on. They're looking very, fresh. The fit is fitting. And they have this giant blue curtain behind them with a row of cups perfectly displayed above. And this is some sort of a table or a bench or a shelf or a something. And my question always when I look at this card, first and foremost, is what's behind the blue curtain? Like, what are we hiding? What's going on here? But then the thing I notice immediately after that is the folded arms. They have their arms crossed over their chest. And to me, it looks like their body language is pretending to be open, but not actually really open. And ultimately, when this card comes up for me, what I think about is am I so focused on keeping the harmony in a situation that I'm unwilling to be authentic, that I'm unwilling to be honest with myself or the other people that are involved and show all of the things that I'm feeling because I just want to focus on the positive or the convenient emotions that I'm having. And so I will often think of this person as a bit of a bullshitter in the sense that they are willing to make themselves uncomfortable. They are willing to hold in and hold back. They are willing to even hide behind a curtain the totality of what they are experiencing just to keep things nice. And I'm thinking about that within the context of our Gemini moon that we have at the beginning of the week, the Mercury Saturn transit that we have in the middle of the week, where both of these are kind of like, what do I think about things and how do I talk about that stuff and to what end? Like, what am I trying to actually accomplish with that? Um, in a very, very neutral way, the Nine of Cups is about feeling a lot of things and how do we feel about all of these things that we are feeling simultaneously, most likely? Are we okay with that? Does that feel overwhelming? Do we have a nice, tidy place to put all of our emotions, or are our emotions just kind of all over the place? And do we feel like we need to be performative in some way or another with what it is that we're feeling? And how does that all relate back to the work that we're doing in Imbolc season and all of this other stuff? Well, one of the things that we talked about in our last tarot circle, which was on the Hanged One card, was, being in this process of sort of being subjected to a lot of things and kind of having to just like deal with it, and being subjected to a lot of things that are really difficult and heart wrenching. And the Suit of Cups is, of course, about our emotions, and about how do we express those emotions, and how is that manifesting internally and externally. And cumulatively, altogether, kind of getting a little far afield here, but ultimately I see this as a card that kind of challenges us a little bit to say, hey, am I really feeling everything that I'm feeling? Am I allowing myself to feel all of my emotions? And also, when I feel all of my emotions, the myriad of things that I'm feeling, how does that feel? Does it feel okay? Does it feel overwhelming? Do I feel like I need to be performing something? Do I feel like I need to be constraining myself in some way? Am I too much? That might also be something that's coming up for us with the Nine of Cups is, am I too much? Is what I'm feeling too much? Um, this is Jupiter in Pisces with the Nine of Cups. And right, Jupiter is a little too much sometimes. It's a lot too much sometimes. Um, and so maybe I'm holding myself back, right? Maybe I want to be way more than what I am, but I'm holding myself back. So within Imbolc season, we are looking at all of the things that we could be in this coming year, all of the things that we could start or give birth to or foster or be a part of. And, and I think that the Knight of Cups here is like, and also, what are all of the feelings that I am bringing to the table within that conversation? Because if I am not honest with myself, first and foremost, about all the things that I'm feeling, especially stuff that's conflicting, especially the stuff that's confusing, especially the stuff that's kind of vague and nebulous, hard to put my finger on. If I'm not being honest with myself around that, then I might be in the process of picking seeds, right? Our metaphorical seeds that we've been talking about all through Imbolc season. I might be in the process of picking some seeds that are not authentically the things that I want to grow or be in this coming year, right? I might be picking seeds on what I think or what I feel is going to keep the harmony internally or externally. And so I think that this card is here to challenge us a little bit in this week and to say, hey, feel the breadth and the depth of everything that you feel. The confusion, the conflict, the happy, the sad, the angry, the tired, the all of it. Like feel all of the things. And know that you are a complex person and you do feel a variety of things by turns. Um, when we are working with this tarot symbolism, um, well, I think that's all I'm going to say about that card. That's all I'm going to say about the card. We talked a lot about the Hanged One card in this last tarot circle. Folks that are subscribed to my Patreon at the Venus level and higher can get access to that recording, that class. Um, and as soon as I upload it, now I'm remembering I haven't uploaded it yet. Oops, sorry, everybody. That's coming soon, I swear. It's like I said at the beginning of the podcast, space and time, little slippery these days. Don't really know what's going on. But ultimately, yes, And this character is wearing red and white, and I'm gonna leave it at that. The magic that I think we can get up to this particular week, our spell casting that I think can be really helpful to us this week. Um, Again, tending holy wells and other natural resources, certainly a potent thing to get up to this week. Um, Personal purification stuff might be really awesome. Honoring and improving your skills around something could be really great. Um, but I think the astrology is sort of dictating a lot of the work that we can and should, I don't know if I want to say should, but could be doing this week, in the sense of, let me get clear on what it is that I'm trying to accomplish in this next year. Let me start to pull away from the fogginess of everything is everything and all the potentials that are out there, and let me start to come back together again and start to get a little more clearer on what exactly am I really passionate about and what exactly do I really want to manifest. Listening to the tough advice that Saturn might have for us, listening to the surprising or shocking or destabilizing advice that Uranus might have for us. Um, and also being open to whatever benevolent assistance Venus and Jupiter might have for us, right? I'm throwing a penny in the well. Let me authentically wish for whatever it is that I'm hoping to do this year. And I don't have to have my plan perfectly in place. I don't have to have it all perfectly figured out. I can say things that are very open ended, like, I want to leave it better than I found it, which is my personal motto that I go by in life, right? And that leaves me open to all kinds of stuff, all kinds of adventures, and all kinds of ways of interacting with those adventures. Um, I want to be healthier and promote health in my community. That can take a myriad of forms, right? But this is a place where I think we can start to kind of slowly begin to coalesce into some more solid ideas of, I think this is what I want to try to do in this coming year. Okay. Very quickly, our astrology this week. Monday, February 27th, waxing half moon in Gemini at 8 degrees. Tuesday, the 28th, the moon moves into Cancer. Wednesday, March 1st, we have Venus conjunct Jupiter in Aries at 12 degrees. Thursday, the 2nd, we have Mercury conjunct Saturn in Aquarius at 29 degrees, and then Mercury scooching directly into Pisces just a few hours later. Friday, March 3rd, we have our gibbous moon at 27 degrees of Cancer, excuse me. And then we also have Venus conjunct Chiron in Aries at 13 degrees. The Sunday, the 5th of March, we have Mercury in Pisces sextile the North Node in Taurus at 5 degrees, and then the moon moves into Virgo. Oh, sorry. Friday the 3rd, moon moves into Leo. Sunday the 5th, moon moves into Virgo. And then, last but not least, Monday, March 6th, we have the sun in Pisces sextile Uranus in Taurus at 15 degrees. Okay. Next week, we've got a big fat full moon in Virgo. So, that's going to be a thing, right? This whole last week and this week, both same message. Where can we drift in the dream, and where can we slowly start to pull the pieces in that we think that we might want to utilize to manifest whatever it is that we're going to do in this coming solar year. And there's going to be a little bit of a culmination energy around that with this full moon in Virgo. Basically 2 weeks out, almost exactly 2 weeks out from spring equinox. Also, let me say that this week is kind of the last week of calm astrology, because it's about to get buck wild out there. It's about to get freaky deaky in the skies. So also that, right? If you don't want to do any magical work this week, I understand. like taking the reprieve before the wild business starts to really kick in to overdrive. That's also pretty authentic. Um all right, my friends, that is everything. The spirit of spring is on its way, whether we want it or not. Here it comes. So, time to dress in red and white and head off into the great unknown. Blessed be.